All yours, Lisa.
Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy 2022. Let's start with approval of our agenda. I'm going to start with a change on the first of the year, first meeting of the year. In 7B, we're going to change election committee chair appointment to election committee recruitment. And we'll get into that later. Does anybody else have any additions or changes? Okay, I move we approve the agenda. May I have a second? Thank you, Ms. McPherson. All in favor of approving our agenda? Thank you. I don't see on here. Oh, yes, I do. Okay, now we have somebody is not muted. I have approval of December 13th, 2021 minutes, and I have one brief change on minutes section 6G, right before the word spearhead. I think we need to add the word to. So it reads to spearhead.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anybody have any other changes to the December 13th meeting minutes? Would somebody like to move to approve the December 13th, 2021 meeting minutes?
I so move as amended.
I will second. All in favor of approving December 13th, 2021 meeting minutes?
As amended.
As amended. Thank you, Sky. That's unanimous. Moving on to item number 3, chat feature. Laura, will you address, please?
Sure. So we are leaving the chat enabled. However, this is just to remind residents that if you have questions or concerns that need to be brought to the attention of the board, please raise your hand in the meeting so that they can be addressed in the actual meeting. The chat is there, but we aren't addressing issues from the chat. Also, we're not going to monitor it. And just a reminder that civility and respect is required at all times in the chat. If there is incivility and disrespect occurring, we reserve the right to boot you from the meeting because we don't want to tolerate bullying or bad behavior in our meetings.
Thank you, Laura, very much. Any comments from the board? Thank you. All right. Board number 4, board updates. Does anybody have any board updates they would like to share?
It was recommended that I attend a pre-submission meeting of the lakefront properties. So I did. I was in and out of it. There were about 50 people there. The lakefront neighborhood is on Lake Kittamaqundi, and it's there's a north portion and a south portion, and it's yeah, I guess that's what I want to say. I thought there would be more people from Hickory Ridge there, and Joan Lankus was the only one. If you, Joan, do you want to say a sentence or two about it? Oh, there she is. I guess not.
I don't really, it was a pre-submission meeting for some changes to a previously approved FDP. It has to do with the fact that they want to decrease the amount of commercial on that section, the northern section, which is currently an empty parking lot near where the Starrett building used to be. They do want to make some other changes. It's going to the design advisory panel on Wednesday night, and in about a month, the site development plan, which will have more specifics as to exactly what would go there, would be it will be included.
There's going to be underground parking and at least one apartment building with apartments across the board as far as socioeconomic status goes.
Yes, a total of 3 apartment buildings, 1 very large underground parking garage with additional parking above, at surface parking. In addition, first floor residential, they want to change the floor area of the building. When it was going to be all commercial, it was going to be a 9-story building, 145 feet max. It's still 145 feet max. But because it's changing to residential, they don't need as tall floors. So it will be 13 floors, but still only 145 feet.
Joan, can you say how many units they anticipate in that building?
In the 3 buildings combined, 775 units, which is what was previously already approved for the that particular location.
And they would like to start construction this winter. It will take
1 year. 1 year from now, it'll take that long to get through the process. So next winter, yes.
Yeah, right.
Thanks
That's
for the updates. Any other board members have updates? Awesome, thank you very much. We move on to our Village Voices. Residents have the opportunity to be recognized and speak for 3 minutes of a topic of their choice. Laura, do you have a timer to help you? You're muted, Laura.
The timer is ready to go.
Okay, so I can't see. So Laura, if you would like to recognize people, if any resident would like to speak.
Yeah, Joan, who has her hand up. Joan, go ahead.
Thank you. I attended every public meeting of the special election committee. I heard repeatedly about all the work being done and all the information being collected. However, the report is simply a listing of the 19 questions assigned to the committee and their vote on each of the items. Many of the items in the 19 questions are clearly articulated in either the Articles of Incorporation or the bylaws. The report does not indicate whether the bylaws would need to be changed to accommodate any of the questions. Nowhere in the report does it indicate how many of the requirements are already part of the village rules, policies, and procedures. There's no indication in the report of suggested next steps. Nowhere in the report or in other documents released by the committee is there any indication that the committee obtained and reviewed copies of election policies and procedures from other villages. It seems to me that the first thing that the committee should have done is to find out what others are doing. Occasionally, the committee would say this village or that village was considering the same issues, but where is the documentation? What was the outcome of any election reviews by other villages? In addition, at the first meeting of the committee, I brought up a few questions that I hope would be reviewed. As a 15-year staff member for Hickory Ridge, I recognized certain items that I felt were missing from our rules of procedure. Where are those questions resolved in the report? I have concerns about the multiple forms related to financial disclosure. Considering that many folks literally decide on the last day to run for village board, will these forms be required to run or simply to serve? How will information provided on the forms be verified? Will the forms and any potential changes to bylaws or procedures be reviewed by legal counsel? What is the timeline for action on the 19 questions? Which questions are related to bylaw changes? Which questions should be added to the election rules of procedure? Which questions should be part of a village board rules of procedure? With elections fast approaching, I'm not sure there's sufficient time for requiring advertising and community comment on any proposed changes. I have specific changes about question 2, as whether to terminate a board member when they cease to be a member of the association. During his discussion of this question, Mr. Lesh reminded everyone that members have a financial interest in the association via their requirement to pay annual dues. In addition, members must abide by the architectural covenants. The village board makes both financial decisions and deals with architectural enforcement on properties. I believe that every board member who's making such decisions about people's lives and property needs to be bound by the same criteria as those members. Furthermore, I do not believe that a person who's no longer a member should be the one making decisions as to whether to remain on the board. That decision should be clarified by a bylaw change similar to what has been done in other villages. Meanwhile, the decision to fill a vacancy rests with the village board, according to Article 2, Section 2.04 of the bylaws. I see no reason to make a change to a format that the village has followed for 50 years.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts, Ms. Lankos. Appreciate it. Any other residents want to be recognized? And Ms. Lankos, when we get to old business, we'll talk more about the report and next steps. So I hope that will answer some of your questions.
Iris has her hand up. Iris?
Okay, good evening. I'm Iris Moore. I'm a member of the Hickory Ridge Community Association and I live in Hawthorne. The Board of Directors has a current conflict of interest policy. Item D, prohibited activities, states that, except in the exercise of an administrative duty which does not affect the disposition or decision on a matter, members of the village board or its committees shall not participate in or vote on any matter on behalf of the association. Item number 1, in which the board or committee member has a personal interest tending to impair the member's independence of judgment. Item C, sanction states, violation of this policy by any village board or committee member may constitute ground for removal from office consistent with the charter and bylaws of the association. The Special Committee on Review of Election Policies and Procedures was tasked with determining the answers to questions about eligibility of people to serve on the board. Question 2 relates to whether a board member's term should automatically terminate when the membership in the association terminates. As Lisa stated, she sold a house and is no longer a member of the association unless she bought a new house or had a duly executed lease, and therefore she should not be voting on election issues for a membership association that she is not a member of. In addition, voting on the question of automatically terminating membership on the board when membership in the association ends, the question of personal interest, and she herself is in that situation. Therefore, she should follow the current conflict of interest policy and recuse herself from voting. In general, it's not appropriate for a non-member to run the board of a membership association and vote on whether non-members can be board members. Keeping non-members on the board of a membership association is the same as allowing outside influence. Just think about this. If you're a member of the association and a board member, and you are voting to allow outside influence of the board, how would your employers look at you? This is especially important if you're in a position of trust, because you never know when your employers or potential clients are looking at what you're doing outside of your workplace. The board members aren't going to support their own conflict of interest policy. What's the point of having it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iris. I appreciate that. I will take a look at the conflict of interest provisions, and with the, I'll talk about it with Laura, and with the board's permission, Laura and I will have a talk with our attorney and to review those provisions. As I think most residents know, we have an extensive but not expensive opinion from our attorney that already addresses my ability to continue to serve on the board, and that includes service. So Laura, I suggest that we add an item D of new business. Iris's suggestion that Iris, what was the wording you used, that I'm an outside influence?
Yeah.
Okay. So can I have a second to add as an agenda item, outside interest discussion on 60? Thank you. I have a second from Ms. McPherson. All in favor of adding that as a discussion item for this evening? We have 4. Mr. Jansen, do you want to vote? Mr. Evelyn, do you want to vote?
Not sure what this amended agenda item is to discuss what Iris Mars said in her resident speak out.
If we should seek legal consideration of this. Okay, so it's unanimous. We'll add this to an agenda as an agenda item 7B. All right, anybody else for Village Voices?
Yeah, Joel Hurwitz from Harper's Choice has his hand up.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Hurwitz?
Good evening. Yes, I listened to some of your election committee. As Ms. Lenko said, I was concerned that they didn't deal with some of the issues in the one that you just dealt with, Lisa. The fact that the articles of incorporation say that 2 of the members of the board don't have to be members. So there's some stuff stuck in our governing documents and the whole web of things. And in researching issues dealing with HB 93, which I do not like the way it is drafted, and I've been having phone call and other discussions with Delegate Terrassa on it. Apparently some of it is not how she intended the effect, but that's, I think, what it says. But one of the issues is that the Columbia Council rep is not a member of a governing body. And in researching that, I found that Jim Loesch apparently was on the committee in 2005 who dealt with some of those knotty issues of Columbia's governance. So it needs to be, everything's all related in a circle with all these things when you get to HB 93. Yes, and dealing with the filing of the conflict of interest and the other forms, it's the same problem with HB 93 of the burden that it would place on a candidate to comply with all that and to file it with the state and to get a treasurer and do all these other things in there. And it's unclear of what criminal penalties are being pulled in from other places in the election code. But again, my conversation with Delegate Terrassa, apparently some of that was not her intent, but I think that's the way it was drafted. So I don't know what your board position is going to be on 93. As written, I would not be supportive of it. I am supportive, however, as your board and committee dealt with, of having disclosure of some of the campaign numbers, which I just didn't expect Delegate Terrassa's bill, didn't know it was coming, to be such a complicated scheme. And if you allow me later, perhaps when you get to it, I can help fill you in on some of the issues that I've found in the bill.
Thank you. Do we have, yes, we have that. With permission, I'd like to add Mr. Hurwitz as a speaker on our section 7C. So let's remember that since he's spoken with Ms. Terrassa. And I believe, Laura, have you invited Delegate Terrassa to come speak with us? I know she's going to speak at, is it Harper's Choice or King's Contrivance at their next meeting?
Tomorrow she'll be at Oakland Mills meeting, I think it is. And then King's Contrivance was kind of the same as me, where Ms. Terrassa is going to put together her summary of the bill that's a little bit more understandable and accessible. I thought after she publicizes that, then we could get her to come, because then everyone would be able to read and understand what's happening, and she could talk to it more specifically that way.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah, Allison Hickman has her.
Actually, before, I just wanted to quickly point out the General Assembly starts this week. So once that kicks off on Wednesday, members of the delegate of the Hurricane delegation will probably be significantly tied up. So if it's possible, if there's a way we can get even if it's the presentation or the recording of her remarks in front of the other villages, that may be helpful, because she's going to be out of pocket for the next several months.
Well, like I said, she's going to the Oakland Mills Village Board meeting tomorrow, and I believe Sandy records those. I'll double check with her to make sure. But Sandy would be happy to give us an update, a transcript, anything that she can.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Hickman, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm perpetually juggling bedtime during these, so I'll be brief, and hopefully I'll be the only one on the microphone from my household. But I did want to just say, I think a best practice with committees and in reflecting input is to make sure that we get a diverse perspective of viewpoints. So with the next steps with this special election committee, one of the things that I'll be listening for, and I hope the board addresses, is making sure that we get meaningful input from a diverse array of stakeholders with respect to age, racial backgrounds, tenure in the village, so that we can really get a full perspective on the impact of any changes being considered. And hopefully that can be structured in a way where it's really meaningful and useful, since I think any changes to these policies really are going to have the impact of reflecting who's going to serve on the board on behalf of our village. And, keeping with James Rouse's vision and making sure that our community is inclusive, I just think that that would be something that we want to keep forefront to all next steps included in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, thank you, Alice, Ms. Hickman. Laura, can you please remind residents, and I think it's on the cover page of the committee's report, can you please remind residents of the opportunities they've had to engage in feedback and comment on the committee's work so far?
Sure. We posted some items for public comment on December 3rd. The conflicts of interest and financial disclosure documents were posted on December 3rd, and those are open for public comment for several days. And then we posted the complete preliminary report of the committee on December 21st. And that complete report, along with the documents again, was open for public comment through December 31st for a 10-day period. And now the final report is available on the website to view, and people can send comment about that.
And Ms. Hickman, later on tonight, Laura is going to review a timeline for further public comment, but I note that the cover letter to the Special Election Committee's report further says that beginning on November 18th, 2021, they had 6 public meetings to discuss the questions the committee was charged with. And during each of those 6 public meetings, there were 3 opportunities during each meeting for residents to speak. And as Ms. Parrish, I'm sorry, 2 opportunities during each meeting to speak. And as Ms. Parrish said, the documents were posted with a comment period. And as Laura will explain, there'll be an extended comment period before the board votes. So thank you very much. Any other residents speaking out?
Yeah, last one is Bill Inglis. He has his hand up. Go ahead, Bill.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, we just finished the report. I was on the committee. I was chair of the committee. I was very honored to be a chair of such an distinguished group of people that included every background of life, professors, doctors, people that I'm just in awe of. And I will say that the work done by the committee was extremely thorough. I personally must have put 40 to 50 hours of work into it. And I would say that the average committee member put an equal amount of work and research into it. And I want to thank each and every person who served with me. It was an honor. The only thing that motivated us was how to get this corrupt corporate money out of our elections. And I think we have come up with a great initial start on it. Out of respect for the immense labor that we put into this and the hours we put into it, I'm hoping the committee, the village council, will accept our work. And it's not carved in stone, but it certainly has a lot of great thought behind it. We did review the village records. I personally read all of the village records on the same topic from Harper's Ferry and River Hill. And I know that Rona, a lot of those documents that she has to eliminate corporate corruption came from the Chevy Chase Homeowners Association. So it wasn't like we went out on a flyer here to try to collect some papers. And I'm really pleased with the results we came up with. And I'm also pleased that, the Iris brought up bullet number 2 about the person serving on the committee. That issue has been resolved as far as I'm concerned, but I agree they should have a financial stake going forward. Hopefully these recommendations will be in place for the next election. And I'm so happy that Lisa Dean is eyeing up that spare bedroom in my house for rental. Thank you so much.
I would like to assure everyone that I will not be running again. I'm happily ensconced out here in Clarksville, so everybody can relax. So thank you, Bill, and thank you for your service. You did a great job as chair. You guys had a big job, and everybody on the committee, we thank everybody so much for all of your work, and we look forward to acting on your report. So thank you very much. Are there other residents who like to speak? And please don't bring that up again, Bill. It just causes trouble. Anybody else who'd like to speak?
I don't see any other hands raised, so I think you can move on to the next item.
See you laughing, Deb. Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Duvall, we're ready for your CA Board of Directors report.
Great. I don't have a whole lot to report because we have not met yet in the new year. Our first meeting back is January 13th. But I can tell you a couple things that are going on. We don't yet have the draft operating budget, which is going to be the big thing that we'll be talking about, probably the second half of January and into February. But I think I should have that probably sometime next week. And I'm imagining that it's going to be on the agenda for the second meeting in January. So that is happening. And then we are also going to be discussing the legislation. And I believe that Jen Terrasa is presenting something to the CA board on Thursday. So that might be another opportunity for people to hear more about that, because I'm pretty sure that I heard that she was going to actually be there and give a presentation about it to the board. So that is happening. And then beyond that, I don't think there's a whole lot more to report. I mean, obviously, you know, mask mandates have gone back into effect in the gyms and everything. And, you know, we just kind of keep on keeping on. I'll probably have a lot more to say at the next one.
Jasmine, is this CA meeting on Thursday an open meeting accessible by Zoom?
Mm-hmm.
Laura, I know
it's
you're
live streamed on YouTube.
Laura, I know you're super busy. I'm wondering if you could put an email blast and put it on our website so interested people like me and could access that easily and remind us to see that on Thursday.
And if you go to CA's website to the, I think it's like About Us, Board of Directors, and you scroll down, it'll have all the meetings, and then it has a link to the agenda and all the documentation that the board will be looking at. It's a work session, so no decisions will be made, but you know, we'll be talking about it. And like I said, I believe that she is going to give a presentation. In fact, I might, while the meeting goes on, I'll verify that in my email, but I think that's what I was told. And there should be instructions there how to live stream it.
Great. Thank you very much. Happy New Year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Jess, I have a question. You might remember a few meetings ago that I talked about the cessation of the time banking program in the teen center, and yet due to COVID, and yet the teen center has been resurrected, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I had a comment from a resident. She works part-time and would love to work full-time, but she has a special needs student, and the after school care for special needs student has been truncated. Was wondering if you know anything about that, or
I think I'd have to have more information to find anything out about that. You know, what school they're at, and is it a CAA aftercare program that they're?
it's a CAA after school care program. And
Yeah.
it has been reinstituted except for special needs kids.
Huh.
So,
I would have to find out more about that and talk to someone on staff to get information about that. I'm not aware of any changes. So, I mean, I can certainly look into that, or you can suggest this resident that she email me directly And then
Sure.
I can put it in an inquiry to staff to find out more about it.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any more comments from the board? Okay, great. We're moving on to new business. Item 7A. At our last meeting, Mr. DeRoche suggested that the board consider a donation to the Red Cross in light of the devastating tornadoes across the Midwest. Laura and I discussed it, and she looked at the budget and she suggested an amount of $250. So I would like to move that we make a donation for the tornado relief in the amount of $250. Can I get a second, or is there board discussion? Any discussion?
Yes, there is board discussion.
Thank you.
I'm definitely a Red Cross person. I was a Red Cross CPR instructor and taught other courses for them and have taught their instructors. In addition, I served on the Howard County Red Cross Disaster Response Team. However, I came across something in the board policy manual that talks about donations, and it states that all written requests should include why the request is being brought to the Hickory Ridge Community Association. For example, the majority of the group's members live in the village, which technically may remove Grassroots, Freetown Farm, Columbia Community Care, and even the Red Cross from consideration. Unless we donate to the Howard County Red Cross chapter, which doesn't even, isn't located in Hickory Ridge. So I know that some people in the past have been vocal about using donation money only for Hickory Ridge organizations. But perhaps we could extend it if we state that it's a waiver for each incident.
Thank you, Sky. Thank you for bringing that up. Preliminarily, I'd like to address, this is not a written request, so perhaps that's a way around that, but I appreciate your comment. And I would like to suggest as a waiver, if that policy is applicable, that we do this for a one-time incident. I see you, Jessamine, we'll get to you in a second. And especially since we already have a pattern and practice of donating to entities outside of Hickory Ridge. Yes, Jessamine.
Right, and that's because nobody saw it in the board policy manual. Other things have been brought to our attention thanks to the new staff that we haven't been following over the past years. So I just thought it was important that we look into that.
Thank you very much. Jessamine?
I was going to say, in essence, what Sky said about the fact that it's not specifically dealing with an issue that's impacting us locally. While I certainly understand the need, I also I am aware of this policy and we've had it for a while. And I don't think that it needs to be interpreted so literally to sort of say we have to ensure that Hickory Ridge residents are directly benefiting. This is a common problem because Hickory Ridge is sort of a Swiss cheese village. So, but we typically have stuck with things that are somehow going to impact potentially Hickory Ridge residents. So for example, like Wild Lake after prom, like not every kid that goes to Wild Lake lives in Hickory Ridge, but some kids do. So in this case, while I really appreciate the sentiment, I think it's too far off of our sort of commitment to serve locally since we're using assessment dollars for this. That I believe it makes more sense. I agree with Sky that if we were donating to the Howard County Red Cross or if someone local had been affected, I think it makes sense. I think we could certainly share information with residents and say, hey, if you want to donate to the Red Cross, here's information how to do it. Here's how you can help if we want to do that. But as a local organization, I believe we should limit our donations to local entities. I would much rather see that $250 go to plan an after prom party for one of our local high schools than to have it go out to the Midwest, just because that's what we do.
Further board discussion?
I guess my take is sort of similar, I guess. I feel like I hadn't really thought about this until Sky and Jessamine brought it up, but I mean, there really are so many great causes, particularly once you start expanding outside of Hickory Ridge. And if I think that policy helps us sort of, you know, keep focused on our community and not have to sort of justify like, oh, we gave money to this group, but we didn't give money to this group, and, you know, have a list of reasons why we felt that was an appropriate prioritization. So I think I might err on the side of kind of trying to choose stuff that's more local. I think the policy makes sense from that perspective. But you know, of course, I don't have any issue with the cause. It's a great cause.
I'd like to amend the motion then and say that we make a $250 donation to the Howard County Red Cross. Can I get a second? All in favor?
Can we have additional discussion before
sure.
you
Yes.
vote?
Yes.
Because again, typically our policy is not to make donations unless they're requested and there's a specific need locally. So again, I still think that changing it to while it is better, it's not going to fulfill what the residents' hope was, and it also has not been requested by that group. And I don't want to take money away from another local, like PTA or some other organization that is more in line with our mission. I mean, I feel like we're in danger of doing what we call in the nonprofit world mission creep, where, you know, we should go back and look at our organization's mission, which is something along the lines of improving the quality of life for Hickory Ridge residents. And I mean, I guess in theory, you could say that the Red Cross does that, but without a specific need or request. You know, if there was a family who had been affected, I mean, we had that townhouse explode several years ago, and we made some donations to the Red Cross that were specifically designated for those families. I still think it's mission creep. That's just my 2 cents.
Any other discussion?
Is it reasonable to just, you know, put it back on the residents to, you know, submit specific requests for the donation?
Okay, I see a DeRoche block on the Zoom screen. I don't know which DeRoche that is, but if they can hear one of the DeRoches, we would be happy to entertain a donation request. And thank you for your big-heartedness and your thoughtfulness about our fellow citizens who are suffering. I will withdraw this motion, and we'll look forward to hearing from you if you decide to move forward with a request. Thank you very much.
Was the motion seconded?
Yes, and I withdrew it. Do you?
Okay, then the person who seconded also needs to agree to withdraw it.
Okay. I will note that we are operating under informal
I
Robert's
understand
rules
that, and I'm just
we don't
pointing it out.
We don't technically need to do that, but if that would make you happy, Sky, Ms. McPherson, would you please withdraw your second?
It's not just to make me happy, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McPherson withdrew it. All right, we're moving on. All right, is that any more discussion? Good with that? Moving on? Awesome. Item 7B. All right. Under the topic of we are grateful for community input and feedback, we learned from our last committee outing that the residents appreciate if when we are recruiting for committee members that when we advertise and appoint committee members that we make clear criteria for selecting committee members. And so while on the agenda tonight was the appointment of election committee chair, and I put that on the agenda, upon reflection, I think that pursuant to resident feedback, we should do the following instead. We should advertise for election committee members. We should establish criteria for election committee members. And as do the members of the board, the resident architectural committee, and the special election committee, we should leave it up to the committee members to select their own chair. I have asked Laura today to work on a advertisement to post, to ask for volunteers to apply to serve on the committee. And I've asked that she suggest to the board for our consideration some criteria that we can consider in applicants for the committee and that residents can consider when they are applying. So Laura, would you like?
Can I interject one thing? I recall that an announcement was made for people interested in the general election committee, and the announcement was made, back in October, maybe even in September, and at least two people expressed an interest.
Yes,
Is that correct, Laura?
2 people did indicate interest, and then they both then applied for the special election committee when that came about. And I was planning on reaching out to those 2 people again for interest in the election committee as well.
So Laura, would you share with us what your thoughts are on sort of timing of advertising and criteria for election committee?
Sure, we could start advertising for the election committee at any time. The criteria that I came up with for being a member of the committee would be you have to be a member of the Hickory Ridge Community Association, which means you must own or rent a property in the village, and that property needs to be in compliance with the covenants. You need to be able to contribute about 10 hours of your time for a meeting or 2, the candidates night that's scheduled in early April, and the election day that's scheduled on April 23rd. And then also we'll have a brief volunteer application form that would need to be filled out and returned to me, which pretty much has contact information, address, and then any information the applicant wishes to share about their experience or interest in the election committee. And then if they had a resume or a LinkedIn page or any other information they wanted to share with us voluntarily.
And then what would your suggestion be in addition to that criteria about our selection of committee members?
Well, I mean, we have always had a hard time getting election committee members and volunteers. So ideally we would accept as many people as we could, because we need people to count votes. We need people to open envelopes. We need people to check in voters and, you know, make sure voters are qualified to vote. There are a lot of jobs to be done.
And do you suggest a timing by which we ask applicants to submit their suggestion and a date on which we would, do you suggest that we interview them? Would that be in a public meeting? Do you suggest a time that we, you know?
Sure, on February 14th, it would be good timing to interview folks. If we had enough, would be February 14th meeting would be a good time to interview folks if we had enough people to do interviews. Depends upon how many people we get. You know, if 5 people volunteer, we can certainly use all 5 people. If 25 people volunteer, there might need to be some sort of process in place to, you know, figure out how to choose, because obviously we don't need that many people on the election committee. But I think February 14th would be a good day. That gives people plenty of time, if I start publicizing it now, that they can read the information about the election committee, what the responsibilities are, and then fill out the form and get it back to me. And then that also gives the election committee plenty of time once they've been, appointed by the board to have a meeting, elect their chair, and move forward with what they need to do.
So are you suggesting the application closing deadline be February 14th?
Now, if we're going to have it at the meeting on February 14th, we should probably have the closing date the Wednesday before, which I think is the 9th, maybe?
All right, I don't have a calendar up, so I'll,
Just
me-
a point of information, I was on this committee 1 year and I just volunteered my time sometime in April and I was accepted. And I know the same situation occurred another year. So I assume that if we only have 2 or 3 people through the committee process, that we will kind of leave it open or something.
I agree, Sky. Like, we can continue to accept volunteers to fill all the necessary positions up to the day before the election if needed. If we don't get a lot of people who want to participate, we need those volunteers to do all the jobs on election day, most especially.
but I do think at some point we do need to establish the committee so they can vote for their chair.
Yes.
Okay, so I move that Laura begin advertising for the election committee members and accept applications. Her advertisement include the information she just discussed, and we will pending folks who are interested, will make a decision at our February 14th meeting and either interview folks if there's a big outpouring, or appoint folks if there is a limited a limited response. And then the committee can take it from there and constitute and appoint their chair. Any board discussion?
I second it.
Thank you. Let's have a vote. All in favor of what I just said, raise your hand. We cannot see Mr. Evelyn.
Nope.
He may have stepped away for a minute.
Ms. McPherson, do I see a raised hand? So I see 4 in favor, and
I just
Evelyn gives us a thumbs
says
up.
he's good to go too, so 5.
All right, thank you for everybody's cooperation on that. Okay, item 7C is in this bill HB 93 submitted by Delegate Terraza. Does somebody want to summarize it? I'll summarize it. Anybody?
I totally
about
would,
Mr.
but
Hurwitz?
I don't think that I am savvy enough with it
Can I-
to do
is
so.
Mr.
So
Hurwitz-
I'm sorry for that, Lisa.
Thank you, Christine. Is Mr. Hurwitz still with us? I see him. Can we recognize Mr. Hurwitz and ask him? This is a bill which I'm very happy that Delegate Terraza has brought up, and that it's now, I think in Ways and Means. It's a bill dealing with campaign finance disclosure, and it particularly important for us, addresses campaign finance disclosure for homeowners association. Can you unmute Mr. Hurwitz, please, Laura?
Just asked him to unmute. We'll see if he pops up.
There he did.
There he is. Okay.
Mr. Hurwitz, could you share with us your understanding of the bill as it applies to, as it might apply if it's passed to homeowners associations?
Everything I learned since Friday when I got a call and an email about this.
Thank you.
So let's start with the fact that I didn't know this was coming at all. Because I approached Terry Hill about having a disclosure and she wasn't interested and think it was a problem. I think, as I said, an overly complicated bill. In addition to dealing with homeowners associations, it also deals with condos and co-ops that have 2,000 units, which I can't find that any exist in Maryland of that size. But it also deals at the same time with another problem that Delegate Trassa has with municipalities not disclosing their campaign donations as well. So it's parallel provisions with that, which overly complicates this thing. And partly for that reason, I think it doesn't go to the committee that deals with homeowners associations, which is Environment and Transportation, and goes to Ways and Means because it's an election bill. So it's designed to apply to homeowners with 2,000 unit or 2,000 lots, it says, which I believe is supposed to cover all the 10 villages. It says then, as with some of your discussion from your committee, that if you have a rule that says that your association is supposed to report donations and disbursements, that you file it with your HOA, and then it's filed with the state board. And then they put on their website, it says. And in case anybody wants to follow along, that's on page 5 of the bill. But then it says if you don't have a rule requiring candidates to the governing body to file, then you have to file it with the state board in accordance with the election law. I interpreted that as basically you have to file things with the state board. Delegate Trassa, apparently his intent was not to do it that way, because on the next page, it basically says that it applies, the whole law applies to anybody who is required to file a report with the state board under the various sections, one dealing with the co-ops, the condos, the HOA, and the local government. So I read it, basically everybody ends up filing it with the state board. And then once you file it with the state board, the problem is you have to get a bank account. I was just on the CEF commission discussion on similar issues with that. So you need a bank account. You need a treasurer. The treasurer has to be responsible for filing the reports required by the state law. And if they don't, they can get fined. There are also criminal penalties, not only in this bill, but in various other places of the election law. So I'm not clear which ones are going to get pulled in and which ones were even intended to get pulled in. And that's one of the reasons I have a problem with this bill, because the way it's drafted, I signed up when I last ran with about an hour left. I sent in my information to the village manager. We had waived our requirement during the pandemic for the petition, so you didn't have to do anything. But now if you have to, as I think John Lenko said earlier, do all these things, when do you have to do them? Yes, that's part of the question. So you have to go not only find people on your petition, but now you find a treasurer who's willing to deal with all this legal responsibility. Because as long as you have your campaign account open for additional years, you have to file additional reports of the state law. And if you don't, you get fined. As I said, having disclosure, I think, is a great idea. Having all this burden is going to deter people from running. The additional problem, the major that I discussion with Delegate Trassa, and as I said, Mr. Loesch has any input on, is the unique animal that is the Columbia Council.
May I interject? I appreciate Joel's very thorough description, but I feel like it's just getting into his opinion of the bill as opposed to what the content of the bill is. And I would rather have us hear from Jen directly or get some information from other villages before we go too far into evaluating the bill. I do appreciate the input, but basically, I mean, everything as Joel has said is true. You have to the association has to disclose information if there are rules in effect. And if those rules are not in effect, then the individual has to do it. And it says that a person cannot accept any contribution unless they have an election committee and a treasurer, like Joel said, and that treasurer can be held personally responsible for non-compliance with the bill. So it is extremely onerous. I just kind of want to second what Joel was saying is in terms of opinion, but that's essentially the nature of the bill, is that everyone's going to have to go through that process, whether, as long as there are 2,000 or more units, whether it's an HOA, a condo, a common housing community, and it's a lot.
Thanks. With your indulgence, I would like to hear, since our special election committee's work and our task ahead of us includes Columbia Rep. Mr. Hurwitz, I would like to hear what you were just about to finish saying about its applicability to Columbia Council.
All right, that's my problem. I think Delegate Taraza's intent was to deal with the Rouse Project issue that dealt with the council rep. I don't think it does, and she was not aware of it until I discussed yesterday, so I don't know what, if anything, she's given additional thoughts to. In addition, she had qualms about dealing with the independent expenditure issue, which I also found that your committee seemed to miss the mark on last week, that people talked about how you recuse if you got the money, but what if you just have an independent outside group who just sends out mailings and doesn't talk to you, just does it. So she didn't think that that could be done, but then I shared with her there's an entire section of the election law that deals with that. So her drafters, I think, are not the best, or she's been misinformed and she doesn't know why things were left out. And as I said, I'm not clear what the intent of a different sections of the election law to be pulled in, and it needs a better person than I, who has more experience dealing with the whole election law in the drafting phase, to understand that. But as I said, I don't think it applies to the Columbia Council because it says it applies to the election for person to the governing body. And as I was about to say, the articles of the villages, basically, I think all generally the same, that says you elect a person to an unincorporated association, the Columbia Council, who then get to serve on the CA board, all is provided in the CA charter. So that is the only two places I know of, well, 11 places that the Columbia Council exists as a legality. So it's not a governing body. It's not even, as from its own language in the Articles of Incorporation, it's an unincorporated association. So it's in between the incorporated Hickory Ridge and the incorporated CA board. And that's a strange thing that I don't think state law has dealt with, and it's certainly not dealt with here to cover that. And I pointed out how she could fix it, but the largest problem, I think, is one, the Columbia Council rep, and two, the independent expenditures. And in both regards, this bill misses those and then puts an onerous burden instead on people running for village boards.
Mr. Hurwitz, with your permission, I'd like to get your number from Laura and give you a call about the independent expenditures that you had some thoughts on about from our committee work. And so I can have a better understanding of that. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Okay, thanks so much. And thanks for your input. I appreciate it.
Happy to talk.
Thank you. Any more board reaction or comment on this timely and interesting bill proposed by Delegate Taraza?
Jansen, following what Joel said, he, I think his assessment of the bill as it was written is pretty accurate. The bill is definitely not going to, so again, the General Assembly doesn't start until Wednesday. And once it's introduced on Wednesday, which is what the bill says, it will be introduced and read for the first time on January 12th, and it's assigned to the Ways and Means Committee. It's not coming out of committee, not the way this bill is drafted. And I can tell you that even looking at the HOCO delegation, whether it's Delegate Hill, Delegate Atterbury, they're going to immediately read this bill and have the same reaction that I did, that it has a chilling effect on diverse people of various socioeconomic means, backgrounds, et cetera. So the way this bill is written, I wasn't privy to the conversation Joelle had with Delegate Terrassa, but it's clear that her reaction means that the way the bill is drafted is clearly overbroad. So I'm going to keep an eye on it to see how it ultimately gets shaped up, if in order for it to even have a chance to make it out of committee.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Okay, thank you very much. We are now going on to our new item D
So
about,
that was just for information only, that item?
yes.
Okay.
Okay. New item D about Miss Mars issue. And to tell you the truth, I did not really understand Miss Mars' suggestion. Did a board member have a better understanding of what her suggestion was? What I'd like to do is invite Miss Mars to have a discussion with Laura and me and understand her concerns. And if Laura has a concern, I'm gonna suggest that we authorize Laura to address this issue preliminarily with our legal counsel. Let's have some discussion on that.
Could you just refresh us as to the subject that she brought up?
Lisa, I think what Iris was referring to was on the election committee's question of whether people who no longer live in the village should be allowed to continue to serve on the board. I think that Iris was saying that because you no longer live in the village, that maybe you should recuse yourself from discussion and voting on that question. I think that's what Iris's point was.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Oh.
I think, I mean, I'm fine with your proposal, Lisa. I also feel like it's been established already. You know, we already paid money to council to get this opinion that you are a legitimate board member. My sense for what was proposed in the report is that it's not something hugely controversial, like saying that anybody from anywhere can be a board member or something like that. Like, this is not going to be a big change. I guess I don't personally see why we have to spend more money going to our council on it. But if that's the direction people want to take, that's fine too.
Laura, I believe you made a comment somewhere about an open secret about people running and serving on the boards in Columbia. Can you share that comment with the board and residents?
Well, yeah, I mean, almost all the villages, our articles of incorporation were written to accommodate Rouse company members who didn't live in the villages on the board. So almost all of our articles of incorporation only require a limited number of people of the board to be members. For example, ours require only 2 members of the board to be members of the association, except our bylaws that were written and revised in 2012, I think it was. At that point, the bylaws require candidates to be member of the association. So we can't have anyone running for village board who is not a member of the association. The only loophole that we have in our bylaws is the residency requirement. And then if someone is elected to the village board and lives in the village and then moves away from the village, there's no requirement for them to remove themselves from the board. But many villages could have people running for their boards, you know, depending upon if they've amended their bylaws and such. If we had made our bylaw amendment, we could have people run for our village board who weren't members of the association.
Right. So as Christine said, we've already paid money and gotten a legal opinion on this.
Yes.
So I'm not running for office. There's no conflict. You know, on Iris's theory, I would argue that there is a conflict for anybody who is running, who is
I think
currently going to
both
be,
Jess
excuse
has
me,
her
I'm
hand
speaking.
up, and so do I.
Okay, I'll recognize you when I finish
And then-
speaking.
Well, we had our hands up before you started to talk about this, Lisa.
Thank you. I would argue that there is a conflict for anybody who is going to be running and will be voting on this issue. So that's just a term. So go ahead, Jess, and then Sky.
Yeah, from what I understand, Iris was trying to say was not that there was a conflict of interest with you specifically being on the board and no longer being a resident, but that when it came time to vote on these particular questions or on these recommendations from the election committee, that it would be appropriate for anyone who would personally benefit from a potential change to recuse themselves from voting on that particular matter. That's sort of that, as you know, I'm sure, that whole appearance of the conflict of interest. So I think she was saying that there's recommended a change, right, that might impact, say, for example, if you could run again, which I know is not what it says, that it would be appropriate to recuse yourself just from that. So I don't think that there needs to be an attorney opinion. I agree with you. I think we have that opinion about sort of where we are currently. I think the issue was if the board was going to vote to change something and someone who's currently on the board would benefit from that change, that it could be perceived as a conflict of interest.
Sky, before we get to you, I just want to respond to Jessamine. How do you determine that on any of the 19 questions that anybody is going to benefit or not from it? So then that knocks out everybody from voting on every issue.
I mean, I can't answer that. I was just interpreting what my understanding of what Iris was saying. I think that's what she was saying, is that on those two particular issues. But that's what we were talking about, not all the others.
Thank you. Sky?
Yes, Jess took the words out of my mouth, except her words were much more eloquent than mine would be. It's also my understanding that Iris suggested, Lisa, that you recuse yourself from voting on that particular item due to a potential or perceived bias or conflict of interest. That's my understanding of what Iris was saying.
Thanks for your interpretation. And again, I would make the argument that everyone who is currently on the board would similarly have a potential or perceived conflict of interest. But Laura, again,
more details about that, because I don't follow that at all.
Well, any one of you could potentially move out of the village and face this same issue.
Oh, right, but we are potential. Your situation is actuality.
And we have an opinion from the legal.
Right, I understand that, and this is not whether or not something is legal, but whether or not there's a perceived conflict of interest, which would result in a recusal of discussion and vote on a particular issue.
All right.
I'm not really seeing the conflict of interest. I sort of feel like it's I don't really get what the potential problem is.
So I don't think this is something that has to be decided at this point. I think my understanding was that Lisa wanted to put this on the agenda to get clarification around it. I would see this would be something that at whatever point a decision is made on these items, that then we would refer to the current conflict of interest policy and then make a decision as a board just under the current conflict of interest policy. And I don't think it's, you know, I feel as though, Lisa, you are taking this personally, but it's
no, I think you're right, Jessamine. I think you're right.
Yeah, it's just as if, for example, if I had asked for money for my organization and we were going to vote on that, I would not vote because I would somehow benefit, even if I wasn't personally, because it's not my personal business. It's just that just even if there is no conflict of interest, it's the idea of taking away any possible assumption that any reasonable person could assume that there's a conflict of interest. So that's all. It's very common on nonprofit boards. It's not, you know.
Yeah, we'll talk about it when it comes up, but since
Yeah.
I'm not running, you know, I don't see where there's conflict, but thank you, Jessamine, for making that point. We'll talk about it at the time. We don't need to spend more time tonight. Thank you so much. Okay, we're on to old business. And I think Laura has a new paradigm about leaving items on the agenda. Right, Laura?
Yeah, so it didn't seem like, I wasn't sure if the Symphony of Lights CA lawsuit had been addressed, because pretty much it was left with, we needed, you know, to reach out to the CA council and see if they would release any information. So I didn't know if you had anything else to share about that, or.
Nope, that was just an informational item for
Okay.
residents. I was asked by a former CA board member to share that information. So I was just sharing that with residents. So as far as I'm concerned, unless other board members have information or they want to keep it on, we can take it off.
All right, great. Now we will not see it again.
Okay, great. Next item, 6 Pence Tot Lot.
Okay, that's me. I don't have much to say, same as in the past few meetings. Basically, if you have not yet and you are in favor of funding the Twin Towers option, which was the option that residents voted in the survey, they would most like to see as a replacement to the current 6 Pence Tot Lot, you know, write to the CA board and, you know, share your opinion on that. Encourage them to fund that project. And as Jessamine said in her report at the beginning, she expects that probably the CA operating budget will be discussed in the second half of January. So Jessamine, does that mean that people could also speak at the upcoming meeting if they wanted to? And that kind of stuff?
Definitely.
Okay.
And then the piece
Okay.
that I'm going to try to fill in for you is, you know, a tot lot replacement would be a capital budget item. And so it's not really part of the operating budget, it's part of the capital budget. And the capital budget is broken down into category 1, 2, and 3. And the rules for what goes into each category are a little different. So I want to try to get some clarification as to how those decisions are made about what's included in the capital budget. Because it's just a little different. So I'm going to try to find that out before our next meeting. So then I can report if there's some specific language that we should be using, you know, please include funds in the category 2 capital budget, category 3 capital budget, whatever it is. And if there's any other way that those decisions are made beyond the board, because some of the capital budget, and I'm sorry, and then I'll shut up, but some of the capital budget funding is sort of like at staff discretion, like it's like a pot, and then it's up to staff to decide what to do with it. So I just want to dig a little more into that, but I hopefully we'll have something for you guys at the next meeting.
Awesome, thank you.
Jasmine, when you're looking that up, can you also determine not just what category in the capital project in the capital budget this would be, but if there is a process to request that a particular capital project gets a opportunity to be bumped up, whatever that preference is, because I think that would be helpful for residents who are interested in writing in and advocating for this project.
Can do.
Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion on the tot lot? I think we'll leave that on, Laura, as we progress through this process. Thank you very much. The next issue is the final report on the Special Committee on Election Policies and Procedures. At this time, I invite Chair of the Committee, Bill English, and Co-Chair of the Committee, Rona Schwartz. to address this for just a minute. We had received the final report from the committee. It is on the website for resident comment. Laura, could you explain the current comment process?
Sure. So right now, the final report of the committee is out for resident comment. It includes 4 pages of a summary report written by Rona Schwartz and reviewed by the committee members. And that has the roll call vote items or items to be discussed. And then it has the documents that the committee proposed. It's all on the website, both on the special committee page and on the home page. Anyone can view those items there. You can email to me any comments, and those comments at this point will be forwarded to village board members. We're planning on leaving those documents up there as is until the 19th, which is next Wednesday. And at that point, well, do you want me to do this too now? After reviewing all of the documents, I did have some concerns. The documents that were proposed by the committee, they're very wordy and lengthy and difficult to understand. And I had a hard time exactly figuring out what some of the requirements were. So I feel very strongly, so it's not a barrier to people running, that we try to condense and clarify some of the documents so that they're more easily accessible to all members of our village. So on the 19th, we're hoping to put up some documents that are a little bit more clearly worded, more condensed, and easier for folks to fill out, just so that we have we don't put up any barriers to people running for office in the village. Jess has her hand up.
Yeah, something I just wanted to chime in about the forms specifically. As I was looking through it, I started thinking that the documents that were created, while well researched and well put together, to me are a little bit outside the bounds of the committee. To me, the procedural piece of the election historically has always been handled by the election committee, and that committee would make recommendations to the board if the board needed to approve them in terms of what the process is. So I feel like just whenever it is that we decide to make decisions on the recommendations, that we should focus on the questions that were answered, sort of, yes, if the recommendation was that there should be some sort of campaign finance, whatever, tracking, whatever, that's great. But I think that the sort of the process for that should probably go to the regular elections committee. And I felt that way a little bit about the online voting piece too. Though typically in the past, that decision has just been made by the board because the village manager just brought the information to the board. But everything else, I mean, I think the committee recommendations should focus on sort of a philosophical type things as opposed to the process for how they should be executed.
I agree, Jess. This board is not a working board, it's a policy board, and we have several staff members who are part-time and full-time, highly qualified. Generally, a policy board sets policy and the staff carries it out on a day-to-day basis and reports back to the board. The board generally doesn't get into micromanaging all the details. So I agree that the board should make a decision on high-level issues and leave some of the nitty-gritty up to the staff, who then would bring it back to the board for approval.
Yeah, I guess I sort of felt like this was the point of the committee, was for them. I mean, not that there was the point of the committee, but I definitely don't feel like we imposed any restrictions on them to say that this was outside the scope of what they were supposed to do. So I don't see anything wrong with them recommending it. And I also, I don't know, it seemed like there might have been, I don't remember who was making the comment at this point, but kind of an implication that that's not appropriate for the board to make some of these decisions, which I don't know, I thought the election committee was supposed to advise the board, and then it was sort of our job to make decisions based off those recommendations. So that, I mean, that makes sense to me. That seems appropriate to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Christine. My point is not that I don't think that the Special Elections Committee has done anything wrong. That's not what I'm saying at all. I think they've made some great recommendations, but I think that we as the board need to be cognizant of the fact of what specifically they were tasked with doing, and then how involved in the nitty gritty, like Sky said. You know, I mean, but you're right. If we're going to be making significant changes, then yeah, the board should be involved. But in terms of the process of how the elections are run, we definitely need more staff input on that, because they're going to be, in many cases, the ones who are doing it, or the election committee itself, because they're going to be the ones who are executing it. So that's all I was saying, is in terms of the form part, I think we should hold off on. I don't know when we're planning to vote on this, and it doesn't matter because I don't have a vote anyway. But that, you know, we should vote on whatever policies first, and then sort of pause on the forms until we figure out the election committee, who's going to be on it, and you know, just think a little more carefully about how to proceed with that.
I understand now what you're saying about, yes, I agree that like the board should not be involved in decisions about how, like the specifics of how the election is going to be run, you know, the pieces that are the election itself. But as for the forms, I guess that did seem like part of the recommendation, and something that it would be appropriate for the board to, you know, make a decision on, like whether we want to use these forms, and whether they kind of accomplish the goals. And I think that as Laura said, like she's planning to work on those documents to get them in a form, and that's going to be more of like a staff task that she's taking on. And I think that that's appropriate, and that's how it should be done. So I think
Christine.
I think we're on the same page.
I agree, Christine. Absolutely.
And
also the staff has been working for years. The staff is the continuity, while as the board could potentially change all 5 people every year. So for continuity and knowledge, and being able to communicate with the other villages on a daily basis to find out how they're handling the same situations. The staff really is the person who would draft up the procedures.
Yeah, I agree, Sky. I think Laura and, you know, other staff are in the best position to know, you know, from the past and their experience, you know, like what is manageable, what's appropriate. So I feel similarly.
Okay. Pinging off Sky's point, the forms are gonna effectuate and implement whatever policy that the board adopts. And, you know, we're gonna base that on, you know, we're gonna be working on recommendations that our special committee recommends to us, and we'll be making that decision. Both the special committee and the election committee are committees of the board, and it is ultimately the board's responsibility and prerogative to make those policy decisions. And it is ultimately the board's responsibility to approve the documents and procedures that are in place. So we appreciate all the hard work that the committees do and will do, and the work that Laura and her staff will do in producing documents, but as Mr. Lesh made clear many, many times, his committee will not be drafting documents. It will be staff who will be drafting documents. And it will be the board who will be deciding policy based on what the committee recommends and what the board decides. So nobody needs to get confused. The board's not going to be heavily involved in getting down in the deep nitty gritty. We're going to be looking at the policy recommendations of the special committee. Staff is going to be drafting the election handbook and the candidates handbook. Board's going to be deciding on the policy directions, but let's not make any mistake about it. It is the board's responsibility to make the decision about and Jessamine, it's not going to be any different from the past. The board will make the decision on electronic voting, and the board will make the decision on if there's going to be changes to the bylaws. These committees are committees of the board, and it is our responsibility of the board to act. So I just want to share that with folks.
I think bylaws changes are up to a vote of the village. Is that correct?
Yes, but it's up to the board to recommend those and start that process.
Right.
Okay. So without further ado, I ask Laura to recognize Mr. Inglis first, and then Mrs. Schwartz to just give us a few minutes turning over their report to us with our gratitude.
Okay, thank you, Lisa, and thank all of you on the board for your service as well. So I don't really have a lot to say at this point. I just want to let everybody in the committee and anybody else who's listening with interest know that there were 7, in my opinion, highly regarded people in our community who worked very diligently. I'm going to say 30, 40, 50, 60 hours, each of us on this, maybe longer. Rona and her subcommittee did an amazing job researching those documents that you're referring to. And we sought opinions, not just from the community, not just from the divergent voices within our own group, but also from attorneys, zoning experts, community experts, people who had superior knowledge in homeowner association guidelines. And we poured over these documents. We argued about them. We finally hammered out something that we thought was in the best interest of the community. That was the 100% entire guideline for us. What can we do to keep this community ours? What can we do to keep corporate money out of it from influencing us? And I understand Oakland Mills has started a similar committee to try to research the things that we have basically blazed a trail on. And I'm very pleased to see that we are ground setters in a certain sense. And I can't speak highly enough about our committee. With respect to whether you acknowledge these reports or the recommendations or the forums or any of it, that's completely up to you. We hope you will bear in mind that the immense amount of study and preparation and debate that went into these recommendations, as well as the forums themselves. And of course, the board has the ultimate prerogative to decide what they're going to take and what they're going to leave. But we hope you will please keep in mind that we did this really basically, the board could have done this without us, frankly. So our task was to do what we did, which was to thoroughly research and examine these issues, hear opposing points of view, and try to cobble together something that would benefit our community and help keep Hickory Ridge in the hands of its residents. And I'm very proud again to serve on it and serve as a chair. I'm immensely proud of my co-chair and the other members. And at that point, I don't have anything to add to it, really. I will turn it over to Rona.
Thank you, Bill. I ditto pretty much everything that Bill said, except I'd like to add a few of my comments, and that is in answer to, I think it was Jess had said, and maybe Sky, about, the
Rona,
board.
could you speak up a little bit, please?
I'm sorry.
Speak closer. Thank you.
I wanted just to make a couple of comments, and I ditto everything that Bill has said about the committee and the hours that we worked on answering the questions. And the research that was done and listening to the village board members who participated in the meetings and the residents who sent us comments. We did read all of them and did modify whatever we needed that we felt was appropriate. However, to answer, or I think it was Justin Sky, you had mentioned that you thought we should have just been an up and down vote on the questions. If that was what we were charged to do, we would have finished this a long time ago and not spent as many hours doing all the research that we did if it was simply just discussing and voting a yes and no. But that's not what our understanding as a committee was. The documents, especially the 6 documents, really there's, 2 of the documents are just stating that candidates received the documents and they're just signing for them, and one is an instruction page on another document. So you're really looking at 4. The documents are directly, or as I stated in the report, the documents are directly or indirectly related to the questions. And they cover, one document covers a minimum of 4 of the questions. And I think every document has a minimum of the questions that are covered of 4 of them. And as Bill said, the documents are generated from, various associations like Chevy Chase. And again, the purpose of our task was to ensure that village board elections are not controlled or influenced by the entities who are contributing to the money to candidates with the intent to influence future actions at the village board. Bottom line is it's the final decision of you all, and we're hoping that you will accept the work that we approved and submitted to you tonight. Thank you.
Well, I'll go first, and I want to thank all of the members of the special committee. Y'all did a tremendous amount of work since October, over the holidays, addressing a lot of questions. You did a lot of research. Thank you for putting your research online. Thank you, Laura, and your staff for accepting comments and collating them. As your cover letter says, thank you for all of the residents for speaking up at 6 meetings, submitting your written comments. Y'all did a great job. The board gratefully accepts your report. We're going to pore over it, carefully consider it, and this is just sort of the preliminary steps. I invite other board members to say light comments at this time before we get to the next item, which is a discussion that Laura will read about some timing and next steps. So does anybody else want to thank our special committee members for all their hard work?
Yeah, I do want to, oh, sorry, Deb. You go ahead, Deb.
I just echo what Lisa says. I'm incredibly thankful for them all.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you so much to everybody on the committee. It is amazing to me how much work you did in a short time. I was not able to be at maybe even half of the meetings, but the ones that I was at were very impressive. I really appreciate how much thought and research went into all of the work that you did. When we started discussing these issues back last summer, I think I had such a simplistic view in my head of, what it would be like to try and address some of them. And, without your work, there's no way that we could move forward on this or make decisions about hardly any of these issues. So yes, very much appreciate all your work. And I think that you have had a big impact.
I agree. The amount of time that the committee spent was just overwhelming. So I appreciate that.
Any more board comments? Okay, great. Thank you, committee members, very much. Okay, on to item D, board action. So Laura and I discussed today, we reviewed the 19 questions, and we discussed sort of a strategy about how to handle this, understanding that that staff would be handling and Laura, jump in if I misstate anything, please. Staff would be handling the writing of the election committee manual and the candidates manual, which would include the documents that go to the candidates, which include various,
Yeah, the campaign finance and the, in-kind donations and all
Right.
that stuff, and the possible updates to the conflict of interest policy.
Exactly. And, those will all be put out for public comment. It is my hope that we will take up on a question by question basis the committee's report for discussion and community comment live at our January 24th meeting. Laura put together the schedule. She's backing it up, I think, from the printer's deadline of absentee ballots. She's waiting for the final word from the printer. So if we hear differently from the printer, we may need to condense our schedule and put in some extra work and maybe call a special meeting to make progress so that we can meet printing and publication deadlines. But my hope is that on January 24th, I'm asking all of the board members and community members to have looked at the committee report very carefully, come with your thoughts. There's some of the 19 questions. To me, it looks like a lot of them are ones that we can quickly come to a decision and a vote on. A lot of them are, I think, non-controversial.
I have a suggestion. I'm wondering if the 19 issues could be A, categorized, and B, prioritized to make it easier for the residents to understand them. I had made this suggestion a couple of times, and I think it would be easier to have all of the issues on one topic together.
I think that I'm going to do a categorization chart of the issues and also list whether it's board action required, if it's just something that needs to be put in the election handbook, something that needs to be in the newly created candidate handbook. I'm going to organize all those topics in such a way to help you guys review them when you do your review on the 24th. But I could also put that out with the documents that we're going to retain the spirit, but kind of make it a little bit more user friendly. At the same time, on the 19th, put that chart out that I'm making for you guys too. So that would help residents to see what goes together, what doesn't go together, what requires a bylaw change, what might already exist as a policy, and what is just going to be like put into the election handbook or put into the candidate handbook or something like that. So the 19th would be when it could be shared. Does that sound good, Sky?
Yeah, I'd also like to suggest that we, there have been written comments that have been accepted and distributed anonymously, which is fine. I heard there were 2 comments that were submitted over Christmas, but they have not been posted yet. So I'm interested in what those comments say, even though those were not directed to the board, but directed to the committee. And I had also mentioned quite a ways earlier that it would be great to have an evening devoted to oral comments from the residents, because at this point, basically, the comments we've received are have taken a lot of time and effort on the part of the writers and a lot of thought. And I just think that we would get more of a flavor of how the village feels about some of these if we could just open it up to a discussion of the residents. And I realize that there are opportunities during the meeting, but I think since we've made it so easy for people to submit written comments, I'd also like to make it easy for people to submit oral comments.
Yeah, I agree that oral comments are definitely really important, but having like a whole meeting devoted to it seems like a lot. Is there a way that we can advertise, like just make sure that people know that, the next meeting is the one to come to with your comments, January 24th, if you want to verbally, give opinions, like that's the place to do it. And then we could sort of do both at the same time rather than having like a whole separate night for comments.
I think on January 24th, if we're going to go over each of the 19 individually and discuss and debate on them and the recommendations from the committee, that I just have a feeling that's going to be a long evening.
Sky, I will note that on the last couple of opportunities for the special committee for people to comment, there were no oral comments at all. I think when Laura categorizes the questions as we discuss them today, we'll see that most of them are, something that needs to be put in the election committee handbook or something that needs to be put in the candidates handbook. I don't think there's going to be many controversial ones, and I will make the suggestion that let's proceed for consideration on January 24th and resident oral comments, and in the meantime, Laura will be accepting written comments that she can share with all of us and also post as she did for the 6 committee meetings, and let's see how it goes. But because we are meeting printer deadlines and publication deadlines.
And I realized, and particularly this is the time of year, especially this week with the weather, that people hunker down and they don't seem to be as involved in community events and issues. I did make this request several weeks ago, and perhaps then we would have gotten more input, more oral input. It might have been good to schedule it for a Monday that the board is not meeting, and I realize that it's probably can't happen now, but we made it so easy for people to spend time and thought in providing written comments, and it just didn't seem that we made that special effort also for oral comments. And again, I realize that people have the opportunity at the beginning, in the middle, and the end of the meeting to say what they want to say. So I guess that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't think we need a special meeting for that either.
I think if we had talked about it more in depth earlier, that it would have been more widely accepted, and more people would have come and verbalized some of these issues.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Sky, and I think I'm definitely on the same page as you with like giving residents as many opportunities as possible to have input. But I guess I do like personally feel like people had they had the opportunities and they still have opportunities. And at this point, I think I feel pretty good about moving on, knowing that people will still be able to verbally, come to our meeting and express any comments that they still have. And my sense is sort of that people were very worried at the beginning and they expressed a lot of their comments then, and they have fewer concerns at this point after sort of seeing the, the meetings and how everything went throughout the
and
course of the process.
it would be good to have this acceptance of oral comments before the next meeting, because then the board members will have gone over all of the 19 issues in great detail and have pretty much come to some sort of conclusion amongst ourselves. So opening it up to oral comments, 2 weeks from now is kind of after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, if they do want to, give an opinion now, they'll have to do it via email or something, but they still do have that option for input. So I think that it's a pretty good array of opportunities to be involved. And Bill has had his hand up. I don't know if we want to give him a chance at some point.
Yeah, just one more thing. I realize that residents can speak on any agenda item during the meeting for 1 minute, but nobody does it because I think they forget. And not everybody's stays at the meeting for the 1 minute update at the end that they have the opportunity for. We actually get a lot more comments in the beginning at the 3-minute resident speak out. So, okay, I'm turning off now.
Recognize Bill, I would just like to say, I do appreciate that Sky and Christine went out of their way to have a coffee house talk for several hours where residents had the opportunity. And if Sky wants to give us a readout on what residents, shared on their concerns and comments and ideas about the special election procedure committee then. But I think Christine's iteration of all of the opportunities, including Sky and Christine's outing into public during the pandemic, thank you very much, to meet with residents for a couple of hours, and the ongoing opportunities they'll have, whether or not they take advantage of it, Sky, whether they're hunkering down or they forget about it. I think it's important that we're offering those opportunities. So thank you. Bill,
I'll be very brief. I know it's not my turn to speak, but there was a question that came up. I think it was from Sky, related to, did I receive or did the committee receive the written recommendations from the community that was left during the open period? And Laura, who is again an unsung hero in all this, she was a lot of downloading and uploading and revising and writing on her part. And we're very grateful to the effort she put in. It must have been some overtime in there somewhere, Laura. Those 2 questions were forwarded by her to every committee member. And both of them, as I recall, dealt with the issue of, both of the parties were very pleased with the work we were doing to eliminate corporate corruption in our elections. And they were also, however, concerned about that they did not want to vote in person. So we really spent a fair amount of time, given that the fact the pandemic's not over, we spent a great deal of time trying to address the issue of how we can arrange for safe voting, particularly in light of our recommendation not to continue online voting. So that's the 2 questions were addressed. They were dealt with us, and we included recommendations to specifically deal with those 2 recommendations from our community. Thank you.
And then Lisa, I know you have a hard time seeing, sometimes Lynn Hannon has her hand up. So Lynn, you have a minute to speak on the topic if you'd like.
Well, are they done everything? Because I don't want to mess with the schedule. I'll get off and you do your thing and I'll start when they're all finished.
So you want to do like during the feedback session is when you want to speak?
Yeah, that's what I meant to do.
Okay, all right, we'll be there in a couple more agenda items, Lynn.
Okay, I'm sorry. I did.
okay, well, before we get off this item, just to recap, I hope that all of the board members familiarize themselves with the documents, including the documents that Laura will be putting out, I guess, on the 19th. And then please, in case on the 24th, Laura's going to put out the, when you say prioritized, Sky and Laura, do you mean timing prioritized? I'm not sure what you mean, like some issues.
Scott meant like grouping by topic. Is that what you were thinking, Scott? Like the concept of interest things
categorizing.
together?
Prioritizing is determining based on importance.
Well, that's going to be different for each board member. So I don't know.
We could also categorize about, put the ones, well, Laura, you're already going to do this when you categorize them by bylaws changes, by status quo already done. So, whatever. So, yeah, I think you've got a good handle on the categories.
Yeah, I'll categorize it in a way, hope that makes sense to everyone. It'll make sense to me. So hopefully we all are on the same wavelength with that.
And I'm just putting it out there just in case we have a tremendous outpouring of resident oral comments on January 24th. I think Laura looked at the schedule, and if we need to do a special meeting, Laura, what was the date we were considering? February?
Yeah, I think it was February 7th because Monday is January is a 5-Monday month. So February 7th, we'd have Monday the 31st off and we could come back on the 7th. And if you needed more time, have a special meeting the 7th and have adequate notice and stuff like that.
Just one more comment. It seems like we'll be doing things in parallel. The board members will be studying each individual item at the same time that the residents will. It would be nice to have resident input before the board members have pretty much made up their minds. So the next meeting will be basically a working session, discussion of the 19, and then a week after that or 2 weeks after that, we will have the final vote on the recommendations. Question mark?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it just depends. Ideally, if you guys could vote on some of the more straightforward ones on the 24th, and then maybe if there's things that require more discussion, then, you could defer those for a later meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, thanks everybody. This is a tremendous community effort and I really appreciate everybody's input. Okay, any resident 1 minute comments here at this point before we move to the next old business item? Okay, village committee reports.
Wait,
Laura?
is this the time that we get to respond, or is that?
Okay, Ms. Hannon, you may have your 1 minute now.
No, I'll wait. I just want to go in order. I'm just
Yes,
not
this
sure
is your
what the
time.
order is.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
This is your 1 minute. Laura, timing.
Okay, couple of things. I really want to thank Christine for coming out in the pandemic. I hope we can have discussions and not just listening sessions, but it meant a lot and I really appreciate that. I also want to thank Laura for being so responsive when I asked. I have major concerns about the draft documents. I wondered if somebody at some point, not now, clarify when we get to comment on them, because they're so vague, it could prevent opposition people from communicating on a project. I disagree with Bill that he had a wide variety of zoning experts. I didn't see any except maybe Alan Schwartz, I don't know. So, and also I disagree with the fact that the proposition you made in this hearing that there were no comments. I couldn't make the last subcommittee meeting because my son was in the hospital and I missed the deadline for to comment on 12/3 12:31 at 12 p.m. because my son was in the hospital. So this whole thing about there's been so much notice, it's been crammed in the holidays. And I know I'm not making any friends here, but that's how I feel. And I've devoted a lot of my time during.
Ms. Hannon.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay. Also, you
Can
can
I
still.
also support that there needs to be some more give and take in this process besides the 1 minute, because I don't know what you're going to say. And I also wanted to say, Lisa Dean, I think the clarification on her conflict of interest, she does have a conflict of interest, even under your proposed conflict of interest policy.
Okay, well, it's time's up though, Ms. Hannon, I'm sorry. And also you can still make public comment on the final report for the committee. And then as for those documents that,
But where do I comment about Lisa Dean's conflict of interest?
You can send an email to me. Feel free to email me and I will forward it to the board members. That's probably the easiest way to handle it.
And you know what? You've been great. And and I appreciate Christine's endeavor in the middle of a pandemic. I really do. Thank you, Christine. And send me the link for the tot lot. Thank you.
I will. Thanks, Lynn.
All right, any more 1 minute resident comments here? Okay, Laura, I think you're up for reports.
Iris has had her hand up.
Yeah, Iris just put her hand up, but Iris, do you want to do resident speak out? Or do you want to do the resident feedback at the end, or do you want to comment on the election committee stuff?
I just have a brief question. Is today the last day of the special committee on election review and policies or whatever it is? Because I need to know whether my time to serve ends tonight or if it's going to continue. I thought there's some more documents being modified or be involved with reviewing and commenting on them as a committee member. That's my question.
So should the committee be dissolved tonight, I guess, is Iris's question. We were talking about, Iris, about having a brief special committee meeting just to approve your final version of your minutes.
Laura, I thought you had said that the board could.
The board can approve them too.
Those minutes, and that the submission of their committee that the work was done. So I thought they were done.
How about if we put on the agenda, because I remember you and I had a discussion before, how about if we put on the agenda for the next meeting to dissolve the special committee on election policies and procedures and approve their minutes? And then that can be like a period on the whole serving for the committee, and they'll know that they're done.
This special committee is disbanded tonight because they turned in their final report.
Okay, so the board doesn't have to do anything on it then.
It's automatic.
So just to make it official, I move that the committee's work is done and the committee is disbanded. May I get a second?
I second it.
All in favor? Okay. It's unanimous.
All right, hang on.
Board is
I note that Mr. Lesch's kitty cat picture has a party hat now.
So Laura, the board is going to approve the meeting minutes next time?
Yes, I'll distribute the special committee's final meeting minutes and you can approve them. Okay, reports. So the Resident Architectural Committee, Tanya and I have been a little bit busy with the special committee stuff. So the RAC guideline review has kind of fallen on the back burner for us, which is totally our fault. We have a few more guidelines that we're working on with the RAC just to get their final approval on them. Once those guidelines are wound up and everybody has given us their thumbs up, then we will bring those guidelines to you all for review. You've got a couple busy meetings coming up here too, so I don't know that you want to be going over the RAC guidelines right now either. So I'm hoping by spring we can get those rolling. We've just all had a lot going on.
I thought you said it would go to the AC first and then.
Yeah, it will, but it probably will come to you guys. I'm thinking, Sky, you guys in maybe March. or so. I'd like
And
to get,
then it has to go to the board, or can the AC just do it?
the AC could just do it. We had talked about that at the last meeting where the AC is given the power, but then let's you and I talk about this offline and bounce ideas around, okay?
Sure.
All right, and then we have our new senior advisory committee rep. They haven't had a meeting yet this January, so nothing big to report. And the watershed advisory committee has organized a spring cleanup, and I don't have the date in front of me right now, but we will be publicizing the spring cleanup. It's all of the villages. We've returned to the thing where all the villages have the spring cleanup on the same day. So that's kind of cool. And the watershed advisory committee is spearheading that. So that's all
Is
that.
it going to be March 26th?
I
It
think-
is.
yeah.
It's March 26th.
Okay.
Thank you, Emily.
Do we have to, as a board, approve the senior advisory committee rep?
I think we did it last time. So Linda was at the meeting last time in December.
But she hadn't
minutes?
submitted her, well, okay, whatever.
It's, yeah. And then.
And Laura, just so everyone knows, the Columbia Cleans program will happen March 26th from 9 to noon, and it will take place at Hawthorne neighborhood.
So the meeting place will be somewhere in the Hawthorne neighborhood.
Yes. The meeting place will be at Hawthorne Center, and then we will jut out from there.
All right, sounds good. Do you want to do a little update about the upcoming events, since it's manager report and that's what is on my manager report mostly?
Sure. Unfortunately, as you guys know, due to the pandemic and the countywide mask mandate, we are moving our events to virtual primarily. We will be hosting a Zoom family bingo this Friday night at 7 o'clock. We will then transition and put a pause for our partnership with the Howard County Library and their mobile bus, and we will put a pause on that for January and February, and I will do virtual story time on the 20th. And we tentatively have a partnership with the River Hill Community Association to host a charcuterie class on February 4th at the Hawthorne Center. But I have a pit in my stomach about hosting it. So Laura and I will talk about that probably tomorrow, about having food in front of everybody without masks. And so we will probably put a pause on that as well, and move forward as best we can with COVID and Omicron at our feet.
Yeah, so that's pretty much where we haven't had any event cancellations, as well, rental cancellations. All of our party rentals are still on the calendar as scheduled. We haven't had any calls about that. But as for our Hickory Ridge events, we are scaling back and, honoring the fact that a lot of people feel a little nervous here. So we're converting to virtual as much as we can. And of course, as soon as it feels safe again, we'll happily re-engage with events back at the neighborhood center again. And then one other thing that Emily's doing that I want to bring up is we got a report from Columbia Association for the first time in a little while of all the properties that had been sold in the village between January 21st and October of this year. So we are, Emily is in the process of sending out welcome notes to all of our new residents to welcome them to the village, let them know that we're here. We have a little welcome gift if they want to come by and pick it up, and Emily's working on putting that together. So we are trying to bring the new residents in any way we can and get them linked into the community and aware of what's going on.
And guys, just so you're aware, I have reached out to Robinson Nature Center, and they will be including a flyer in all of our welcome bags for the new residents, allowing families to attend and peruse Robinson Nature Center for free for a day, which is very exciting. So hats off to Robinson Nature Center.
That is super cool. Good job, Emily. Thanks for reaching out to them and doing that.
That's great.
And that's pretty much it from my manager's report.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. Any board comments?
I'd just like to thank the staff. I think the decisions they're making about canceling the events are very wise decisions. I believe we have at least another 4 weeks of Omicron issues to work through. You probably know that that was my field before I was retired, so I keep up on the virus, and I think we're probably pretty close to peaking right now on Omicron, but it will be at least another month. So I think the decision to cancel some of the events was very wise. So I appreciate that.
This is Jansen. I want to echo Sky's comments, but above and beyond that, not even just with regards to their wisdom and their prudence in canceling COVID and going virtual, but just the level of work product, the professionalism and the amount of activities that they have been doing. It's impressive, and I continue to be deeply impressed by Laura and Emily and all the rest of the staff. So thank you. And for all my neighbors, best wishes in this new year.
I'm just going to echo what Sky and Jansen said. The amount of work and extra hours that the staff has been putting in with, the RAC guidelines updates, the special committee, what's coming on with them putting together the election handbook, the candidates handbook. It's just amazing. And Laura's available, seems like 24 hours nonstop. Emily's hitting it out of the park with all of these activities. The staff is just great. And I just love calling the center when Bill answers the phone. It's just, you guys are killing it. So thanks for everything that everybody's doing. You're just representing the community so well. Thank you so much. Okay, any more board comments?
Yep, just wanted to thank everybody and everybody stay safe, So hopefully we can get some relief soon.
All right, we're on to feedback session, 1 minute. And Laura, I'm sorry to put you in the position of bad guy, but we're approaching 10 o'clock and I'm going to ask at the 60-second mark that you turn off the speaker and thank the speaker and recognize the next person.
Okay, well, Joan Lankos is the first person with her hand up. So Joan, go ahead.
I would like to request that the hard copy of my comments earlier be included with the minutes. And I forwarded them to you.
Gotcha.
Laura.
Is that
That's it?
Okay, that was not a minute. Anybody else? Iris, go ahead.
Want to take the time to thank Laura for all of her work on the special committee that I've organized and typing, trying to keep us on track, taking minutes and so on. I thank her for her patience and bearing with all of our differences as well. I really do appreciate her effort. So thank you. I want to thank the board of directors for giving me the opportunity to serve on the committee. It was a pleasure to meet some of my neighbors that I haven't met before. So again, thank you very much.
Awesome. Anyone else to recognize?
Mr. Hurlwitz has his hand up from Harper's Choice. Go ahead, Joel.
Yes, want to comment on some of the things from before. As I shared with Laura, the hearing's on the 25th, so it'd be hard for you to, I guess, give your input if you don't have a meeting in time to sign up for that. Jansen talked about the delegation. It's not a delegation bill. It's really up to the committee, but just Vanessa Atterbury, I guess, the chair now of Ways and Means. And in the last few minutes, while I've been listening to you, I sketched out what I would have in a state law. Part of it was built on what your committee did. As I mentioned, Harper's Choice has a lot of this in our bylaws, and I wasn't sure to the extent that you can do a lot of the things you're doing in just rules. So part of it was to authorize that in the state law, to have disclosure requirements, to have posting of your forms basically on your website, and to deal with the independent expenditures.
Mr. Hurwitz, I saw your village's bylaws and how lengthy your election procedures are covered in your bylaws. That's amazing. So congratulations to your village. No
Yes,
doubt.
and I was sent guidelines that repeat a lot of it, but seem to have some more too.
You guys have it on lockdown. That's awesome. So thank you for your comments. Okay, anybody else, Laura?
That looks like it.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Let me just run down action items real
Oh,
quick.
thank you very much. Yep, there it is.
Oop, my pages are sticking together. So if I'll see if I can get Jen Terrasa's marks from the Oakland Mills Village Board meeting tomorrow night. Email and website blast the CA board meeting around information, because if Jen Terrasa is going to be doing a presentation at the Columbia Association board meeting, I'll share the information about the board meeting so people can attend that. And wait. And for the 2 comments that we received during the break to the board members about the special committee information, and that's it.
All right. Thank you, Laura. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Deb is moving. I'll take Christine as a second. All in favor? Unanimous. All right. I'm calling it at 9:42. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Hey, Laura.
Thanks, everyone.
12
Good
minutes
night.
past.
Good estimate. Good estimate.
12 minutes past.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks.